My name's Danielle. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is November 1st, 2008. Before I really get started, let me just explain the denim. I've already been given crap about it. And I did not wear jeans to a speaker meeting to offend anybody. Please let me just say that from the bottom of my heart. Every time I have spoke, I have shown up in girly girl, princess, country club gear. And I'm just not the girly girl, princess, country club. It's not who I am. And what I'm wearing doesn't change my story. So please know that I didn't do this to be disrespectful. I did it to be comfortable and just be me. And again, I say, what I'm wearing doesn't change my story. And so my story starts like everybody else. You know, I'm born to some fairly normal people. My dad was military. My mom was a stay-home housewife. She was a wonderful, blessed, do no wrong Christian, wonderful woman. Dad was busy. You know, he was military. He worked with JAG. And I was born with alcoholism. I am convinced of that. I was born mischievous. From as soon as I could crawl, I was always getting into stuff. As soon as I could walk, I was wandering off, doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing. One of my mom's favorite stories to tell about what kind of kid I was that in first grade, we lived in Hawaii, and we had to walk home. We lived on a military base. I skipped school for a week, saved my lunch money for a week, skipped school on Friday so that I could go to the rec center, and didn't get home when I was supposed to, didn't stop by the daycare and pick up my little sister and take her home, and I was in big trouble. When I was a kid, my dad, used the belt. He gave us whoopings, and for that little incident, Mom said, "You just get up to your room and wait till your daddy gets home." And I said, "Okay." And I was a smart kid. I put like 5 or 6 pair of underwear on, 4 or 5 pair of shorts, and 2 pairs of sweatpants, and I was ready. And he came up the steps, snapping that belt. And I jumped up off my bed, and he came to the door and opened it, and I said, "Hey, Daddy, I'm ready. I'm going to take my lickings." He said, "Good, honey, drop them." And I did not. I took off running with his belt, and I didn't come home till after dark. It wasn't until I was much older that Mama told me he came home completely out of breath, sweating, and said, "I think she's getting a little too big for whoopings." And that's the kind of kid I was. We moved around every 2 to 3 years. I had a baby sister that she was born sick, and so she was truly babied. And I remember being little and resenting the hell out of her. She cried all the time. She was sick all the time. She was a bubble baby for about 9 months, and everything was about her. So I wandered off, got into things I wasn't supposed to be getting into. Little things. The big trouble didn't come till later. My parents split up when I was 7. My mom took me and my sister and brought us back to North Carolina. My dad stayed in Hawaii, and I was devastated. You see, the way that I saw it as a 7-year-old little girl was that my sister was Mama's baby, and I was Daddy's little girl. And now we were back in North Carolina, and I was nobody's little girl. And that feeling stayed with me for a very long time. We would visit with my dad, but it just wasn't the same. By the time I was 9, both my parents had remarried. By the time I was 10, they were both expecting. So I now had half-siblings, which, they were my world. There was no half to it. But at my father's wedding reception, I discovered alcohol. And that was my first drunk, my first blackout, my first get sick, and my first, I can't wait to get up and do that again. Because I was drinking with the grown-ups. I was cool. I was everybody's girl. And I went home and spilled my guts and told my mom, and of course she threw a fit, and, that's just not the Christian way of life. And by now, my stepfather, we had come to find out that he was an absolute raging alcoholic, and I could relate. And into my teenage years, when he was supposed to have quit drinking, I was the kind of teenager that would find his liquor on top of the closet, empty it, because I needed it for myself, fill it back up with whatever it was supposed to look like. And then when he figured it out, and he would come to me and say, I know you took my drinks. And I'd say, what are you going to do? Tell Mom? You're supposed to quit drinking. I was an evil little brat. I was pure evil and smart as a whip, for a kid. How would you figure that out? I'm going to tell you how, because I was born with alcoholism. It comes naturally. But my teenage years were long, fast, and hard. By the time I was 13, I was facing some pretty serious legal problems. And in order to get myself out of it, I chose a geographical cure, and I went to move in with my father, who then was in Indianapolis. I spent 6 months in Indianapolis before he had to request orders overseas to get me out of the crap that I'd gotten into in Indianapolis. And, all through the crap that I was in, I still made great grades. I really did. But I was kind of a follower, at school. At home, I was me. I was a leader. I took care of my little sister. I did all the things I was supposed to do. But at school, if you said, hey, take this, it will help you stay awake through your final exams, I'd go, okay. And it spun out of control from there. I skipped school for 6 weeks in junior high. I showed up for my final exam, and my history teacher looked at me and he said, who do you think you are, skipping all this school and you're just going to show up for a final exam? You think you're going to take your exam and pass my class? And I said, well, what's your final exam? I'm sure I can pass it. He said, okay, smarty pants, get up in front of the class, recite the Gettysburg Address, and if you get it right, you can pass my test. I said, and the whole class? He said, yeah. I said, all right, 4 score. And I don't remember it all now. But, I was too smart for my own daggone good. So I made it through school. And that's how I made it through school. But I was drunk every single night. I was sneaking around, doing what kids shouldn't be doing. And alcohol was my best friend. It made me the center of attention. It made me cool. It made me popular. But eventually it made me real angry. And that anger took me to places that I never thought I'd go. By the time I was 15, I had been kicked out of the country of Germany. I'd gotten into a whole lot of stuff that you're not supposed to get into, especially in a foreign country, being a JAG Sergeant Major's daughter. Because when Sergeant Major can't control his 15-year-old daughter, he can't command his troops. And so the Army said, you're going to have to choose between your career and your daughter. And he did. And they were going to put me into a German foster home until I turned 18, unless my mother said she can come back stateside. And thank God she did. And so I came back stateside, and I had promised the world and myself, like we always do, that I was going to come back and I was going to finish high school and I was going to do all the right things and make all the good grades, and I wasn't going to fight anymore, and I wasn't going to be in gangs anymore, and I wasn't going to do things I wasn't supposed to do or sell things I'm not supposed to sell and run things across borders that I'm not supposed to do. And I didn't last a week before I packed the bag and took off again. When I was found this time, they took me straight to juvenile detention. And in juvenile detention, they said, we can't help her. This girl needs to be in a hospital. And so the sheriff's department came and got me and took me to treatment in Raleigh, a place called Charter Northridge Hospital. And they had an adolescent unit. And when you show up at this treatment center, you have to put on these little blue pajamas because they had this system for people like me who were not just alcoholics, but little juvenile delinquents also. And they made you wear these blue pajamas until you gained so many points because you followed the rules, you did all the right things, you worked the steps, and you did what they told you to do. It was a 28-day treatment program. I had really, really good insurance, and I was there 94 days. And on my 94th day, they gave me my street clothes back and took back the blue pajamas because that's the kind of little teenage alcoholic I was. But when I came out, I had to have what's called a home contract. So they sent me to Fort Bragg to see this man God love him, Judd Berryhill. And he did this home contract with me, and he said, you will do this, 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 and this. And he was a scary dude. He stood up, and he was one of the first people in my life that said, you will shut up and you will sit down. And I did it. And he said, you're going to do all these things, or you're going back to juvenile hall. I said, all right, I'll do them. And so I did them for a little while. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I started tipping the bottle again and pretending that I wasn't and trying to lie. I was going to meetings. And then came the day that about 28 people of Alcoholics Anonymous were at my home when I got there. And they did an intervention, and they said, it's time to get real or die. And so I went and picked up a white tip at 16, almost 17. But by the time I was 21 years old, I had been sober 5 years. And I was all into Alcoholics Anonymous. I was the AA police. I was the AA guru. You want to know what page this is on? I will tell you. And I was sober, and I really wasn't sober. I was a little guru because I finally felt like I fit in somewhere. When I said that when my parents split up and I was nobody's girl, I still carried that in the back of my mind for a long, long time. Part of treatment was they wouldn't diagnose anybody as an alcoholic. That was your choice to make. And so they said I was a potential alcoholic. And I took that and ran with it because it was always in the back of my mind. And so after about 9 years sober, dry, I went to a Christmas party and I drank again. And I stayed out almost 10 years. And I ended up married a couple times. Like any good alcoholic does. I had my little girl, and I was her mom, and she pretty much grew up, in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I had her when I was 19 years old. And I'm going to tell you, she could have lived her whole life and never see Mama drunk. She didn't know what that kind of life held until I relapsed. And I'm going to tell you, it's absolutely true. When you've been sober for a little while, or even dry for a little while, and you go back to drinking, it's like you never stopped. I was trying to be cautious. I was trying to be very, very careful because I didn't want to end up back in that AA, and I stayed out for a very long time. I was actually a pretty productive relapsed alcoholic, to tell the truth. My life progressed probably the way that it should have early on. But because of my early introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous, at least I knew where to go. I knew where to get help when I needed it. The years that I was out there, right before I relapsed, my baby sister was diagnosed with leukemia. And I was there as much as I could be. Let me say that, when I was kicked out of Germany, my father never had anything to do with me again. Until my sister was diagnosed with leukemia. And then, things like that happens. Families tend to at least have a discussion. But it was so bad with my father, he didn't even want me to be tested to see if I was a bone marrow match for her, because he didn't want my blood running through her veins. He didn't want her to end up like me. He hated me. He hated Daddy's little girl. And once again, I was nobody's little girl. And I'm not saying that contributed to my relapse. I never did things the right way. I held that all the complacent thoughts that I could possibly have, they stayed with me through every chip I picked up. But when she died, I was at least still sober. And I was able to be there for my father. And we had 4 wonderful years together before he died. But when he died, and he committed suicide, I was not sober. And that was some of the most dysfunctional years of my life. I had been home with him for about 4 days before he did what he did. And I didn't know how I was going to make it through that. I really didn't. So like any good runaway, I packed up and left. And I abandoned everybody. And I'm real good at doing that. Once I say goodbye and I'm done, I'm done. And it's not healthy. I'm not suggesting that at all. But it's real hard for me to let people in and keep you there, because it gets to a certain point and that's enough. That's enough. And so I drank and I worked, and I still got up and went to work every day. And then, I met somebody again and had a few drinks and got married again. And I decided that I was going to go back to school. And so I did. And I don't know how I made it through college. I really don't. But I did. I made it. And graduation night was horrific. That was in May of 2008. And I graduated from nursing school May 10th of 2008. And part of nursing school is you have to go to an AA meeting so that you can help alcoholics when they become your patient. So I took all my fellow nursing students and I said, I'm going to take y'all to a place that I know very well. It's called Sandalwood. And it's in Fayetteville, but I'll drive. And we went and everybody, well, hey, Danielle, what are you doing, And so I had to explain this to some of my nursing school buddies, and I said, oh, I've helped a lot of these people. I never did explain, Of course, now they know. They all know. But, good times. But the reason I say that is because the first time around, I was 16 years old in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a female. There were not a whole lot of women with long-term sobriety. So I was pretty much raised by a bunch of old-timers, and I mean some old goats. And there was this man, his name was Pete. Oh, God, that man saved my life. His name was Pete Nahila. And, he was very well known in Alcoholics Anonymous. He would take in anybody. He'd let you sleep on his floor if he didn't have a bed for you. And when I was 19 years old and pregnant, my daughter's father kicked me out of the house one day. And, not because I'm difficult or anything, but... So I came home and I ended up homeless, 19, pregnant, and with nothing. And Pete took me in. And he had taken in several other alcoholics. So we were just kind of like our own little halfway house. And, I told this story one night in a meeting, and I think some people kind of got the wrong idea. So I want to kind of clarify. These men saved my life. They were all pretty much sponsors. And one of them, his name was Mike Lee. He was just a phenomenal person of Alcoholics Anonymous. He did what he said, and he just followed through with everything. And he was one of the most spiritual people I've ever met in my life. But keep in mind, I'm 19 and I'm pregnant, and this guy Pete has let everybody under the sun come live at the house for a little while, and I didn't have a bed to sleep in. I was exhausted. The floor was left open, and I said, well, I'm not sleeping on no daggone floor, So he said, well, come on, Danielle, let's go get a hotel room. I'll get a hotel room for the night, and you can have a bed to sleep in. I know you need to rest. You're pregnant, blah, blah, blah. So we went to a hotel. He come back out to the car. He said, they don't have any rooms. I said, all right, let's go to another one. So we went to another one. He comes back out to the car. He said, they don't have any rooms. I said, dear God, they must be having a convention or something in town. So we drove around until about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Every single time he'd come out of that hotel, he'd say, they don't have any rooms. I finally looked at him and I said, Mike, you don't have any dang money, do you? He said, not a dime. And so we went back to Pete's house, and by the time we got back, that floor looked pretty daggone good. But this man, Pete, when I was 17, after that intervention that I told you guys about, he told me he was going to take me to lunch one day, which was odd. But we went to lunch, and then we pulled up at this house, and he looked at me and he said, okay, Danielle, did you have a good lunch? I said, yeah. He said, good, get out. I said, what do you mean get out? We're in a shady part of town. I'm like, I'm not getting out here. He said, get out. Then this woman comes walking out on the porch. She put her hands on her hips. She said, you must be Danielle. I said, I am. Who are you? She said, I'm Alberta Green. This is your new home. You got nowhere else to go, darling. You got nowhere else. Nobody wants you. You're wreaking havoc on everyone that comes in touch with you. And it was a halfway house. And I lived there for about 10 months before I got emancipated. And I'm going to tell you, that woman saved my life. We had to get up in the morning and do our chores before we could go on about our day. I didn't realize that. I got up in the morning and got in the mirror and Started putting on my makeup and getting my hair did. And she walked in there one day and she said, Danielle, get out of that mirror and quit looking at yourself and go get your job done. You ain't ever going to get the outside looking right anyway, not until you work on the inside. And I don't know why that hit me so hard when it did. It's one of those lessons that I was taught early in life and I didn't learn until much later. There's a lot of those. There's a whole lot of those. But Pete had a heart attack. It's been a while now. Mike had a heart attack and died the day that I was graduating from nursing school. So nobody called me. Wouldn't have done any good because I got carried out of Beltree on a stretcher. After passing out in the bathroom, EMTs were called. They got there. I was not responding. They told my sisters, who happened to be with me with my other colleagues, and said, you better get back in here or she's not responding. She's not going to make it. She's getting ready to die of alcohol poisoning. And I don't remember much of that at all. I don't remember any of it. I remember waking up in the ER and a nursing buddy of mine, Jose, who passed away this year, he came in, he said, Danielle, we didn't let them cut your jeans off because I know you'd kill them. And I turned and I saw my teenage daughter sitting beside that bed. And she was just a boo-hooing. And I said, oh my God, what have I done? I didn't feel that low ever in my life. Because what I had been doing for several years by then was sneaking around, passing out at night after I'd put her to bed. I thought she was oblivious to all this. And she was not. But I promised her that night, honey, I'm done. I'm not going to drink anymore. And I lasted from May to July. And I was off and running again. And Halloween night, she took off with her buddies to go do her trick-or-treating thing. And by the time she came home, I had locked myself in the bathroom on the floor. I'll have a thing about bathroom floors, I guess. And I played eeny, meeny, miny, moe with 2 guns. I chose one, I put the gun in my mouth, and I pulled the trigger. And when I pulled that trigger, the telephone rang, and it was my mother. And she said, what are you doing, honey? Miranda said you're locked in the bathroom. She can't get you to come out. And I remember getting scared. Oh, Mama's going to see me like this. And I threw the gun in the dirty clothes hamper, both of them. And I jumped up. And no sooner was I out the door than she was there. And like any good Al-Anon, gave me a sleeping pill, put me to bed. And the next morning, she said, honey, you need help. You've been the strong one. You've been the one that I've never had to worry about. Because you could always take care of yourself. And so I called somebody that I had actually stayed in touch with in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I said, I need help. I don't know that I want it, but I need help. And she said, are you sober right now? And I said, right this minute I am. And she said, just drive here. If you want to drink when you get here, I'll take you to the ABC store. I said, okay. And I drove to her house, and I stayed at her house for 2 weeks. And then I went to another member of Alcoholics Anonymous' house. I stayed there for another few weeks. My daughter stayed with my mother. By the time that I was able to walk and talk and actually lift my arms again, I went home. I was about 6 weeks sober. And my daughter said, I can't do this anymore. She said, I'm going to live with Grammy because I don't want to do this anymore. She said, I'm tired of seeing you passed out. I found all your mini bottles. You can't hide them. I'm tired of having to tuck you in. I'm tired of cleaning up your wine that spills on the floor. You think I don't know, but I know everything. And so she went to live with my mom while Mommy tried to get sober. And I got sober. And I started working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed to find the right person to help me. And I went through sponsors, like it was M&M's, because I'd get a sponsor and we'd get to a certain point and they'd say, Danielle, you really need to do a 4th and 5th. Okay, you're fired. So I'd go get another sponsor. Okay, Danielle, we've done this. You really need to do a fourth and fifth. Okay. You're fired. And that is the God's honest truth, because Danielle couldn't look at Danielle. If Danielle had to look at Danielle, I'd have to look at everything that I had done my whole life. Oh my God. I was not willing. I wasn't even sure that I still wanted to be a part of this world at that point. And so I did the best I could with what I had at the time. I didn't want to drink, but I wasn't sure I even wanted to live. And so I prayed and prayed and prayed. And several of you have already heard this story, but it's so important. I prayed, God, help me to know that you're real. All the things that alcoholics pray. Step one for me was fine. I know I'm powerless over alcohol. I get it. I'm not in denial anymore. When I overdosed on alcohol, I was so weak that my brother-in-law had to feed me because I couldn't feed myself. That was humiliating. Y'all know that feeling. You know that feeling. But I didn't know how to have the other good feelings. I was comfy with all the negative stuff. I'm comfy fighting people. I'm comfy cussing you out. I'm comfy drinking alcohol so that I don't have to feel that shame, guilt, and remorse later. And so I started praying, God, give me a sponsor that's going to actually be able to get through to me. Give me a sponsor that's going to help me and make me work these steps, because if you don't find somebody tough and hard, I'm just not going to do it. And that was about what it came down to. And so I prayed every night, just send me a person, send me a person. And I had this dream that I was Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, and I dropped a house on the Wicked Witch. And in my dream, I walked around the house to see who the Wicked Witch was. And there was this woman that went to Alcoholics Anonymous. We called her Lunatic Lou because she was tough. She was a bad woman. Just tough as nails. On the streets, people ran from her. And she was the Wicked Witch that I had dropped the house on. And I remember waking up going, God, not Lucy. She hates me. I don't even like her. But I went to a meeting the next day, and she was there, and she had kind of slacked off on going to meetings because she had some personal things going on. But I followed her out after that meeting, and I said, Lucy, I need to talk to you. And she turned around, and she's about 4 foot tall. I said, look, I need a sponsor. I need to work the steps. I'm going to die. I don't think I want to die anymore. And she just looked up at me. She said, oh, you must be serious because I don't play. She said, so here's what you're going to do. She said, you're going to call me every day for 30 days, and I might extend that. She said, you're going to go home, and you're going to get rid of all your slutty little dresses. And call me tomorrow. I was like, oh. But I did it. And that woman met with me every single day for months. And all we had between us was God and a big book. And a whole heck of a lot of cups of coffee. And I'm going to tell you, my behaviors did not change for a very long time. The reason that I tell not so much detail when I talk is because there's just way too much to tell. But I can tell you, you would have thought that I was still drinking for many years. I got in fights in AA meetings. It's not funny, but at least you come to a point in your life when you can chuckle a little bit about things. I never threw a chair in an AA meeting. I might have thrown several people, but I never threw a daggone chair or a table. And I'm going to tell you, it was easier for me to hit you and hurt you than it was to say you hurt my feelings. It's the kind of girl I was. And I got in my last fight in a business meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I'm going to tell you something. I was trying to work the steps. I was doing the best I could with what I had at the time. And I got in this fight. My daughter was there. She saw it happen. And this woman jumped up in between us two. And she said, Danielle, what are you doing? You're supposed to be a lady today. What are you doing? And I stopped. And I went outside and I sat down. And this other woman came up to me, sitting on the bench, and she said, "Are you all right?" And she's holding her side. I said, "I'm just getting warmed up. You want some?" She said, "No, you got me pretty good." And I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah, I was trying to separate you guys." She said, "You got me pretty good. You knocked the wind out of me." She said, "I'm still hurting in my side." And I started crying. And I said, "Oh my God, I never meant to hurt you." And she said, "Danielle, what do you think you're going to do when you put your hands on somebody out of anger? What do you think you're going to do?" And I lost it. And I went home and I called my sponsor that night and I said, "It's time to do 4 and 5. I'm tired of hurting. I'm tired of hurting other people." And she said, "You're right. It's time to do 4 and 5. And so we did. And this woman, this 4-foot tall little Tasmanian devil, she sat me down in front of a computer and she said, "I want you to listen to this song before we do your 5th step." And y'all have to understand, I was 4 or 5 years sober by now. And she played this song, I'll never forget it. It's called "Heal the Wound and Leave the Scar." And she said, "I just want you to hear this and start feeling before we do this step work." And I did not do my 4th step initially in the traditional Big Book method. And I'm saying this because this is what worked for me. See, I had never let anybody get to know me long enough to do it that traditional way. So she had me do it in a timeline. I started with the year that I was born. I wrote down things that were significant in my life. And she made me read it to her, okay? And while we were doing the 5th step, then we put it in the column format that Alcoholics Anonymous suggests. But I couldn't do it any other way because she wouldn't have known. She wouldn't have known. But I got to a point that was my last night in Germany. And my last night in Germany was not pretty. You know, the military police barged in on our home. They knocked down my bedroom door. They hogtied me and took me away. And when they pulled me up off the floor, I saw my 4-year-old baby sister at the end of the hallway. And she said, "I love you, baby. I love you, big sister, but I can't love you anymore because you're a monster." And then I moved on to 1988, and my sponsor said, "Whoa." She said, "Did you hear what you just said?" And I said, "Yeah, I know. I lived it. I heard it. Good." She said, "No. You have lived your whole daggone life like a monster because a 4-year-old's perception of you was a monster, and maybe you were. But it's time to stop. It's time to let that go." And I boo-hooed. You know, because by now, that baby sister had passed away from leukemia. And I didn't get to make those amends to her. You know, not really. And so we finished with the timeline. We moved on to 6 and 7. And she said, "You're alone with 6 and 7 for 2 months. And then we'll get back together again." And that's the way she did it. I made my list for step 8. I had to go back and redo it because she took one look at it and she said, "BS. This can't be all there is." I said, "All right." I went home and redid it. I have made amends on some of the most insignificant things in life to others because to me they were everything. Something as simple as finding an old best friend from junior high school, another part of the evil Danielle. You know, my best friend and I had gotten into it. I think we were in 8th or 9th grade. She called me the B word. I didn't talk to her for a week, and then I called her on the phone. I said, "Come over to the house. We're going to talk. We're going to talk it out because I miss you." As soon as she came on my front porch, I beat her butt. The positive of Facebook, I hate Facebook, but the positive of it was that I was able to send her a message, "Can I call you?" And I called her and I apologized for that day. And I told her, I said, "You were absolutely right. I was being a B word. I was jealous because she made cheerleading squad and I didn't. I'm not the cheerleading type. I just wanted the attention." And she said, "I don't even remember that, but how grown up of you." I started crying. How grown up of you? Oh my God, if you do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, you get to be a grown up? And things like intuitively knowing how to handle situations which used to baffle us, those kinds of things happen. You get to find out about the joy of living. You get to pay your bills before you go out buying a bunch of junk and, alcohol and changing your phone number because you're not going to talk to the bill collectors. Oh, they got my number again. I want to tell y'all that for 3.5 years, when I came back into Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't have anything to do with my family. Not a thing. And I was sober about 4 years when my sister came to my house one night. She said, "I miss you." And I just started crying. I said, "I miss you too." Wasn't very long after that my mother was able to be in the room with me when I had my miracle child. The last time I had talked to my mother, I walked up to her at a courthouse and I said, "I just want you to know that on this day at this time, my mother died." And I didn't speak to her again. But she was there for me when I found out. Well, not when I found out, but she was there for me when I had my little boy. And there have been so many miracles, so many simple ones, okay? There's not enough time for me to go through my miracle list. But you will often hear me talking about miracles and look for them and pray for them and write them down, even the little ones, so that you can remember a time when you didn't have miracles. Because when you're sober and you do what Alcoholics Anonymous teaches you to do, you have miracles every single day. Every single day. I have half the goods. I cannot carry a child full term. I have a little boy that's going to be 4 next month. To me, that means Danielle is forgiven. If Danielle can be forgiven, any alcoholic can. And I'm going to tell y'all, this morning, I got up early. My parents came to pick me up for the air show today. This is a day in the life of an alcoholic. They picked me up for an air show. I go out to this air show. I get to see several people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I told a buddy of mine this afternoon I had the best of both worlds. I had my AA family over here with my real family over here, and they commingled. My parents are not big fans of Alcoholics Anonymous. I told my buddy also today, I said, hell froze over today. I survived a 30-minute, very small airplane ride with my stepfather, and we both walked off that plane when it landed. I didn't throw him out. I even took a picture of us together. Y'all, that's a miracle. For reasons that I can't get into from this podium, but that's a miracle. I was supposed to go have dinner with a gentleman at his house this evening. I don't even see him here. He probably ate too much. But I had been invited to go, and I really wanted to go. But, when you get caught up with family, the day just gets away from you. I did good to get home and get a shower and change. Hey, at least I did that. And, probably even 5 years ago, I would have said, God dang, your parents came and kidnapped me this morning, held me hostage all daggone day, made me go out to this air show, get in a hot freaking airplane, ride around with them all day, had to eat at daggone McDonald's. I was late getting here, didn't get home in time to pick out a pretty little dress for my speaker meeting. And today, the difference is, I was blessed to wake up this morning. I should not be here. There's no reason I should be here today, except to help, hopefully, provide hope for another suffering alcoholic. And to get to a point in my life where I can finally appreciate the joy of living. Because that's what it's really all about. It's about finding the joy of living. It's about surrendering, giving up. I used to say, it all revolves around acceptance. I don't believe that so much anymore. I think it all revolves around trusting in the power that we have found that has helped us to restore us to sanity. I was sitting on that bed tonight and I said, I'm not comfortable in this dress. I'm not comfortable in these pants. I didn't have time to iron anything. I sat down, I said, God, why can't we just wear jeans to a speaker meeting? And it hit me, why can't you just wear jeans to a speaker meeting? I threw away my slutty little dresses. Most of the time, and I am not perfect, I don't do this every day, but most of the time, I wake up in the morning and I thank God for letting me take that other breath. Because that night in May of 2008, I should have died. My heart stopped. What I found out was that my blood alcohol level that night was only 0.13. That was it. But what happened was my heart stopped. It depleted my body of potassium. And they had to really dose me up with potassium. That means I have an allergy to alcohol. Oh my God, who'd have thought it? Didn't it tell us stuff like that in the book? I have actually sat down and read through the big book. I read through the 12 and 12. It is amazing what you will find in there. It is amazing. For a little gutter rat like me to come in and find people that show up for me even in my bad times, to find a place that says we love you just the way you are, that can commingle with my family, and it's okay. Man, Alcoholics Anonymous is so worth it. I have the same job that I had about 2.5 years ago. That's a long daggone time for me. I got a promotion. That's the first promotion I've ever had in my life. I complain about it. I have my BMW days. That's a B word, moan and whine, for those of you who don't know. And then I'm brought down to right size again. Before the meeting, Steve and Jeanette and Katie took me back in the room to get me prayed up for talking tonight. First daggone thing he said is we're going to have to pray extra hard because she wore jeans to a speaker meeting. That's okay today. We were joking around about placing wagers on taking our stuff out to the parking lot. We were just joking. Alcoholics Anonymous has afforded me the ability to just be me. I have learned what it means to grow up. I've learned what it means to truly love others. Tom used to tell me all the time, you got to trust God, clean house, you got to trust God, clean house, and help others. And I can't go do this if my house is not in order. And I used to think, God, that means I've got to get up every day and clean my house. That's not what he was talking about. My sponsor told me a long time ago to dig a little deeper in life and find the real meaning of things. I dug a little deeper, and I really believe that God's purpose for every single person here is to just learn how to love and help other people. I think it's really that simple. And sometimes love means saying goodbye. Sometimes love means saying, maybe you shouldn't wear jeans to a speaker meeting. So if I offended anybody, I'm really sorry. But I was comfy. I'm very grateful today to be able to look at life through a new pair of glasses. There's no telling I know where I would have ended up. And at a time in my life, I was okay with ending up 6 feet under. I don't want to do that anymore. My life matters today. Your life matters to me today. And believe me, there was a time when it absolutely did not. When we say that serenity prayer, when we say the Lord's Prayer at the end of a meeting, if it doesn't mean anything now, my wish for any newcomer, anyone that's doubting, is just stay until it does mean something. Stay till it counts. They say stay before don't leave before the miracle happens. It's not just one miracle. There's going to be several. I promise. That's all I have. Thank you.